Hey crafty friends, this is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you some easy stenciling techniques and we are going to make 3 different slimline cards. Now I'm going to be using these really cool slimline stencils. I love that they are sized perfectly for a 3.5 by 8.5 inch card, but you definitely don't need these exact ones. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about these stencils later on in the video. I'm working on top of my all-purpose mat for some easy cleanup, and I'm using Post-it tape here because it's repositionable. You could also use washi tape to hold the stencil in place on top of my slimline card base. Close to My Heart sells these pre-scored card bases as well as envelopes together in a pack. They measure 3.5 by 8.5 inches. I'm using texture paste and then also some inks to color that texture paste. Now I showed you Harbor there, that was the dark kind of teal color, but it ended up being too blue, so I will switch that out for Peacock ink to get it a little bit more green looking. One of my favorite ways to color texture paste is to just press the ink pad down onto my mat and then mix it into the white texture paste. Here I had to add more ink because it's a very light color, that mint, and I wanted to get it a bit darker. So off camera, I went ahead and mixed also the Lagoon and the Peacock ink with the texture paste. So that's how I have those 3 different piles of color. And then I am just applying it through my stencil with a palette knife. Now the reason I like using ink pads is it doesn't add any more moisture to the texture paste, which means it doesn't change the consistency of the texture paste. This allows it to go through a stencil and keep its shape really well and not become runny and move outside of the stencil. I'm going to be overlapping the colors here kind of unevenly. I want them to mix together sort of organically, so I will overlap them a bit and let the colors mix. Since they're all different shades of teal basically, they work together really nicely. Now if you're wondering where I got these stencils from, they are actually a reward item that is only for consultants or makers, and I'm offering them as an exclusive this month. So for the rest of May, if you sign up as a VIP with me, then you will get a free pack of these stencils. Being a VIP has some awesome benefits. You get 15% credit back on everything you spend. And then my VIPs get 2 free Zoom classes every month, so you can join from anywhere in Canada, as well as sneak peeks of new products coming and an exclusive group on Facebook. If you'd like more information about becoming a VIP, it'll be down in the description box, and also feel free to leave me a comment. I'm all done with the texture paste, so here comes the big reveal. I love removing the stencil and seeing what we have. This turned out awesome. I love the fade between the colors. Now I couldn't let all that extra texture paste go to waste, so I actually ended up grabbing a piece of toffee cardstock and doing the exact same colors, the exact same way on that piece. And once I was done, I actually really liked the toffee piece more than the white. So I kept the white for a future card, but I decided to go ahead and use the toffee. I cut it down just slightly smaller than the card base, and now I'm going to start embellishing it. I'm using the postage frames thin cuts to make these little embellishment pieces, and I didn't use the full shapes. I just chopped them up a little bit so that they would fit really nice on my card, and I did cut them out of pearl paper. So this is a white pearlescent paper, so they have a little bit extra shine on that very matte surface of my card. I'm using some super skinny foam tape strips because they fit perfectly on the back of these frames, and I'm going to pop all of these 3 frames up. I'm not going to show you all 3 of them, the process of popping them up, but just so you know that all 3 of them do have dimension. Then I have a strip of this toffee cardstock, and I grabbed this stamp set. It's called Flowers of Remembrance. It's a special stamp set for the month of May, and my archival black ink, and I'm just going to stamp this thank you onto the middle of that strip. I always like to test my stamps first and stamp off on scratch paper just in case they're not transferring perfectly yet. We'll end up trimming that strip down, but for now it's just a placeholder. I'm going to bring in my layered flower thin cuts. I love this set. I've used it a ton. It's super useful. And I cut out a bunch of the pieces. I'm using Desert Rose cardstock, the dark side and the light side, some retired Buttercup yellow cardstock, and then Toffee for the flower center. Decided to cut my leaves from vellum because I wanted to keep them light and airy and not cover up too much of that nice stenciled background. When I'm working with florals like this, I like to cut out a bunch of pieces, figure out how they're all going to layer together, and then just try them out on my card before I stick anything down and make sure I like the location and the direction they're facing, etc. Decided to remove those extra vellum leaves for now, but they will end up coming back in the end. Then I decided I needed to trim up my little sentiment strip. I cut a banner on one end and just trimmed it down to size so it would fit perfectly over that frame. I did use some foam tape to pop it up so that it's not sagging over the frame. Next, I'm going to work on shaping some of my flowers. So I always like to give them a little bit of shape. My Cricut spatula works perfectly for this, gives it just a little bit of curve. This top layer here has 2 layers glued together, and then I shaped it after I had glued them together. And then I decided, you know what, I want to distress this a bit. So I took a nail file and I am just sanding the edges of my flowers. Since Close to My Heart cardstock has a white core, when you sand those edges, you get that nice distressed edge. It really helps that the cardstock is double-sided, so it has a light side and a dark side, and then the white core, so there's lots of different shade variations that you can achieve. I'm using a pop dot to attach that little yellow center to my flower, and then for the little brown center, I'm just going to sand it a little bit and then attach it with glue. You could pop up every layer so that you get a ton of dimension. I tend to keep my creations a little bit flatter so that hopefully I can mail them. I don't hand deliver a lot of cards, so I like to keep the mailing aspect in mind when I'm creating. When I first got these floral dies, I didn't know how often I would use them. Lots of times I cut flowers on my Cricut or I stamp them, but I have gotten a ton of use out of these, especially for quick little projects like cards, because I can easily just die cut a few pieces and boom, have flowers. So here is my finished card with everything shaped and sanded and attached on. I also added some gold glitter gems. I love those glitter gems because basically they look like just crushed glitter trapped inside the clear gem, and just adds that little bit of sparkle to finish off this card. I love the look of that texture paste on the brown. A lot more muted colors than I usually use, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. Now we are on to card number 2. I'm using that Sunburst stencil and I'm working on top of white cardstock, still on my all-purpose mat because we're going to be doing some more messy stuff. I put a little bit of adhesive underneath the white cardstock to hold it in place. And now I'm grabbing some thin washi tape and I'm just going to use that to attach the stencil to my all-purpose mat. This works really good because everything now is secured down and it's not going to be sliding around on me. I grabbed 2 ink colors. I have Lemonade, which is the lighter yellow, and then Sundance, which is more of like an orangey yellow. And I'm using an ink blending brush here to just put down a layer of the Lemonade. And I'm just kind of going all over. It's a little bit darker towards the center of the stencil and then lighter as it goes out. But generally, I'm just trying to get a coat of yellow down over the whole area. If you've watched my channel regularly, you may notice that I have started using these ink blending brushes a lot more recently. I used to only use inking tools, but I like the flexibility of how light I can apply ink with these brushes, and it just blends seamlessly. Now I'm going to grab the Sundance color and I'm going to keep this focused on the small part of those rays, kind of towards the inside. That's where I want it to be the darkest, so that it can just fade out to a lighter yellow towards the edges. If you enjoy ink blending, I would love to know what your favorite tool is. I'm always on the lookout for something different, something new. I would definitely like to get more ink blending brushes. So if you have a certain brand that you really like, please leave it down in the comments. I would love to hear what you think. Now I'm just going to peel up my stencil to have a peek and see if I got it dark enough, if I'm happy with the color. And yep, that looks good. So I grabbed my Stickles Moon Dust Glitter Gel. Love this stuff. It's transparent and it's just chock full of different sizes of glitter. And I'm just going to spread that all over my whole stencil and just give it a nice, light, even coat. I don't want to put this on super thick because it does take a while to dry. You can gently heat set it, but I usually have the best results if I just let it air dry. You want to make sure you wash your palette knife and stencil right away. And while my panel is drying, I've grabbed the May stamp of the month. Every month, Close to My Heart has a different stamp set that is featured for that month that if you're a VIP, you can get for free, or you can get it for $6.75 with a $60 order. Well, this month is a gorgeous set. I love it so much. I've used it a couple times, and I am going to stamp a little mountain range here. So I stamped the middle one first, and then the one edge. And then for this other side, I actually need to use some washi tape to mask off the moon because I don't want to have double moons. So I'm just going to do that quickly and then line it up and stamp it again. I didn't get these perfectly lined up because really I would have needed to have my head right over top, but that's okay. I evened it out with a black pen later. And now I'm taking my scissors and I'm going to trim off the top part of this paper. So I am cutting right along the very outside of that top black line. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you watch this whole cutting process. I just wanted to show you a little snippet of it. And then here is the finished piece. I am using that Post-it masking tape again, and I'm lining it up with that middle line between the mountain range and the reflection. Then I'm grabbing my Heather ink, it's a gray ink, and one of my blending brushes, and I'm just starting on top of that masking paper and blending upwards so that it will be darkest right at the edge of that masking paper. Now I could definitely be using a larger blending brush for this step, but I was out of clean brushes. I didn't have anything else that I could use gray ink on. So that's why I'm using such a tiny brush. So it's taking me a little bit longer than normal to cover this, but that's okay. Next up, I'm going to grab my Sundance Yellow and I am going to start by blending on top of the sun or moon or whatever you want to be. I'm doing it kind of like the setting sun. And I'm also going to hit the tops of the mountains because I figured there would be a little bit of a yellow glow. It's not going on super dark. I'm kind of tapping it off to make sure I'm not getting it super dark and just adding a little glow on the top of those peaks. Now I'm peeling off that Post-it tape and I'm going to reposition it so that it's lined up above the black line so that I can work on the reflection of the mountains in the water. I'm starting off with a layer of Glacier ink, which is a very light blue, and I'm doing the same thing where I'm starting right on top of the Post-it tape and blending my way down. I had thought about leaving it with just that one shade of blue for the water, but then I decided I wanted to deepen it up a little bit. So I grabbed my Sapphire Blue. This is quite an intense and dark blue, so I am tapping off on my scratch paper there just so I don't get it too dark. And I'm keeping it right at the top, so I'm not taking it all the way down. And now for the best part, the reveal, when you can see what everything looks like together. My panel is dry that I did the glitter gel on, and I thought the white was just a little bit too bright. So I went ahead and grabbed the Sundance ink again, and then I am just lightly adding some over top of the glitter gel to those white areas in between. I'm keeping it more towards the center. There's a little bit going towards the outside, but not too much. I'm keeping it mostly towards the center. For my card base, I made it out of toffee cardstock, and I was just kind of looking at it to see how it was coming together. I decided, you know what, I really want to add some trees. So I grabbed my rosemary ink, which is a very muted green color, and I just stamped those trees all the way along. Don't worry, you'll get a better look at it later on, but I just kind of randomly stamped some little trees, and that tree is from the Stamp of the Month set. Now I grabbed my shimmer spray here, and I'm masking it off and just giving it a light spritz. That water needed a little bit of sparkle, but this is very subtle. It's not a very bright sparkle. I decided to add my sentiment down in the water area. So once that mist was dry, I'm grabbing the saying it says with deepest sympathy. That is from the Flowers of Remembrance stamp set as well, and just using black ink to stamp that. I covered the whole back of that panel with foam tape, and I'm just going to go ahead and peel all of that off and stick it onto my card base. So we have really nice glitter from that glitter gel. We have the dimension of the mountains and all the inking and shading and stamping. And I wish you could see the soft shimmer that is on the water, but it just does not translate on camera. But I love all the dimension in this card and how it came together. For my final card, we are keeping it simple. I taped down the stencil over top of some toffee cardstock, and then I'm using the coordinating ink, the toffee ink, and I am starting in the one corner there. And basically, I am just going to do a nice fade of the ink. So I'm going to keep it good and dark on the one corner and kind of along the top a little bit, and then fade it out as it goes down. Now, if you guys know me, I love techniques, and I also love to do like super complicated, tons of steps, all sorts of things. And I was thinking about some of those techniques for these stencils. And then I just decided, you know what? You can get some beautiful cards with just simple ink. You don't even need multiple shades. You can use one shade of ink and get some beautiful results. So I just wanted to show that to you guys and maybe remind you of that if you're like me and you tend to do super complicated techniques all the time. And it's good to remember that the simple ones can look really beautiful and impactful as well. Now, as you can see, I have flipped my stencil up a few times just to check on it and see how that gradient is going. It's hard to tell when you're just looking at the top side of the stencil. Now next, I decided I wanted to reveal some of that white core, so I just sanded 3 of the edges, and on the long side where the ink kind of fades off, I decided to rip it. With the white core, if you rip towards yourself, you reveal that white core and get that nice strong ripped edge. So I end up ripping it on a little bit of an angle because I thought that would be fun, and then I'm just going to stick it down onto one of my Slimline card bases, leaving that nice white border. Now I'm going to add my sentiment with a die. This is a Just Because thin cut. I will have all the supplies linked down in the description box for you guys. This one is current. I cut it from Harbor glitter paper and also several layers of black cardstock and just glued them all together and stacked them up so that it would make it a little bit thicker and give it some dimension. And then I used my layered butterfly thin cuts, and I did a layer in Harbor cardstock, Lagoon, and the detailed layer is done in Mint. And I am just gluing them with like one line of glue on the body of the butterfly right on top of each other. I could have used some foam tape in between the solid layers, but I decided just to bend them up with my fingers. Now I'm just going to repeat that with the other 2 butterflies, and then as I'm putting them on, I'm just kind of fluffing up those wings. They're not going to retain that dimension if I put them into an envelope, so if you want them to stay a little more fluffed up, definitely use some pop dots in between the 2 solid layers. But this was good enough for me, and I like that they will flatten down to send in the mail. I'm going to play around with them a little bit and adjust them, tilt them this way and that way until I'm happy with the placement, and then just put a little bit of glue on their bodies to attach them into place. I finished it off with some more of those gold glitter gems. I love that little pop of sparkle. And that's all I have for you guys. Now remember, if you want to get your hands on these exclusive stencils, I will have all the information down in the description box for you. It is only open to my Canadian friends, I'm sorry, but all the other supplies will also be listed down there for you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.